Hello, everyone. I am feeling a little bit better, a little less tired, a little more focused, and I feel like I'm starting to get a somewhat foothold on this new way of thinking, but it's still going to take time, probably even months. But yeah, this new understanding is going to help a lot of people, I think, come to the understanding that I have of the connectedness of everything in the relationship. So I think this next one is going to, like I said in the end of the last video, be very controversial probably with religious thinkers because it has to do with rapture. But I think the connections that I drew in understanding is the truth of what will happen. And you could say that's prophecy, but this is the connection that I saw, and I'm going to try to just go over it. It may be wrong, may be right. I'm not a prophet. I'm not, a fortune teller. So I'm going to go into heaven and hell, meaning and purpose, and then I think I already went over synthesize. I see I redid an entire thing right here. So we can go over meaning and purpose, heaven and hell, and then maybe get into forms, which I think I already went over as well in connected way. Okay, so heaven symbolizes the harmony achieved by balancing extremes. Cooperation and compromise lead to equilibrium and ultimate well-being. So you have the dichotomy of good and evil, and obviously that's an abstract dichotomy, and it's of the right mind. So it's not of the Luciferian intellect or grounded in reality like the empiricist side of your brain wants. So it's of the right mind, that what you're trying to do is picture the dichotomy of good and evil. And that has to do with subjective experience of dichotomies. So that's why the idea of hell is is hot, which would be on obviously one side of the extreme. And then the idea of heaven, you could say, is cold, but it's not cold. It's the equilibrium. Hell is both the extreme cold and the extreme heat. So you could say it's hell either way. So the framing we've conceived of traditionally isn't correct. Heaven is the equilibrium. It's the synthesis of ideas, synthesis of dichotomies. It's the middle ground, the compromise, the cooperation between two extremes. And where that is exactly is going to be different for each dichotomy, especially for life, because we're much closer to absolute zero when it comes to what is the equilibrium for life than absolute hot. And for, God only knows why. But that's the truth of the matter when it comes to dichotomies. So heaven symbolizes the harmony and the balance, which is another reason why we've been selected for in a normal distribution, because that is the harmony or the balance that we see in people when it comes to your morality. On average, the human population is average, right? That has been selected for across the most amount of contexts across these different dichotomies. So we've been selected for against these dichotomies and obviously physical constants. I think I used the word cosmological constants before, which is a different thing, but I'm trying to piecemeal this together. So so that's the idea of what heaven is. It's not an extreme. Heaven is the balance. It's the harmony between two extremes. And that's what Taoists try to go over, but they don't quite conceptualize perfectly, which is what my dichotomies are trying to do. Or I wouldn't say because that would be possessive, and I'm trying not to be of the Luciferian mind. So this is our knowledge. It's everybody's. We're all connected to this knowledge. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. And open your heart, you'll see it. This pattern can be seen throughout nature. When natural disasters happen, a local population, entire world falls apart. Things become erratic, unstable, but slowly they return to equilibrium and homeostasis, or I would say heaven, takes place. So in dealing with these trials and tribulations, the on the other side of it is heaven, and that's where they get to. And it's okay, because right now we're going through some of those trials and tribulations in our society, but it's creating a new synthesis, because we're utilizing new knowledge of science, which is saying, like, science is getting far ahead of religion. Religion needs to catch up. And that's what part of what I'm saying is trying to elaborate on. So it's not that I'm saying this is the entire truth. Everybody's going to need to pitch in on this. I am not God. I am part of God, and so are all of you. So we all need to collectively come together to piece this together, the pieces that I'm putting together, and we can only do that with open minds and open hearts. So I truly believe that we can all do this. We're all prophets if we try to be. We can all chip this together, and I know I'm wrong in certain ways. So please help me build this. If you understand what I'm saying, if it makes sense to you, ask ChatGPT. Everything that I'm saying is of the nature of reality. And it's even confused when I ask it some of these things, because it tries to say that being on and off is a true dichotomy. Like, it thinks in binary. It still does. And we aren't of that nature. We're of the nature of thinking in states, the states of things. And that's what our right hemisphere, which is the one that should be in control, how it thinks. So make sure that you don't let your left hemisphere think of things. Because if you think of things only as binaries, on and off, rational, if you're very rational, you need to open your mind. And you need to see the relationship between things and how it's just a flow of states. So, the divergence is often a precursor to a new synthesis. Through trials, we grow and transform, reaching new states of balance and understanding, a process encapsulated by the concept of rapture. So rapture is the Hebrew word for it. I'm not sure what it is, but I know it's defined as journey or like experience. So we're going through this experience and journey together, and it's a continuous journey, and it's going to happen again. Like, there's going to be a time or a period where our lack of knowledge and understanding is at odds with our rational side of things. Like our comprehension and our ability to abstract these ideas is going to be at odds with our intellect, and the intellect is going to start slowly taking over again. And then it's up to the right hemisphere to catch back up and open itself up again, and gain that ultimate connection between what the left hemisphere has been processing about reality. So we're processing ourselves in that we're part of this consciousness. So we're understanding ourselves by understanding ourselves, which is an interesting way to think about it. But this stuff keeps getting revealed to me as I'm speaking. I've never written any of this down or even heard anyone say stuff like this. So if you think in this way, it will happen to you too. And you'll start to draw these connections. Okay. Okay, so rapture signifies the continuous journey towards higher level of harmony and comprehension, achieved after overcoming challenges. Like I was saying before, like we're going to have times where things become unstable, and we have to figure out a new synthesis or account for the new discrepancy or the new change in our environment in order to reach that harmony or synchronization, synthesis, homeostasis, whatever word you want to use that says we find an equilibrium between these extremes again. That's the idea of rapture. It's not just an event that the world's gonna end. It's that we're gonna go through trials and tribulations, and as long as you open your mind and heart to God, you'll be on the right side of it, and you'll be okay. Because the people who are rationalists, the people who are of the nature of the Luciferian intellect, are going to be the ones that kill each other. They're going to be the ones that argue and rationalize and try to be the ones that fight over this new conception of a reality. And in doing so, they're going to have a lot of pain and suffering, but the ones that come out on the other side will also be the ones that accept God. So they're going to kill people, and then they're going to accept God. So it's kind of sad and tragic that they have to live the rest of their lives knowing that. But that's a prediction I'm making. So rapture is positive, presenting the end of old ways and beginning of new awareness. The shift can be unsettling. Ultimately, it unites people, fostering love and eliminating evil. Few will die from this transformation. Most will awaken into a new reality, promoting unity and love. So I already went over that. An example is balance between extremes, which I went over. This cycle it's a cycle, right? Because this will happen again. So it's happened in the past with Jesus, and it's happening again. And people have already been advocating for this. I'm not the first. So they just have a misconception of what it is. I'm able to articulate parts of it, and I need other people to help me advocate the whole, so I can flush these ideas out. So, and then we'll all become the world, and the world will become us. We'll become children of God, and we will be reborn. So meaning versus purpose. One, establish a purpose that people view as good for something. This is what the left hemisphere is good at. So I've went over purpose a lot, and I think it's not what people think it is. Purpose is of the left hemisphere. It's like, what does this thing do? What is its use? What is it? So that's what the left hemisphere does, is it reduces things to what it's capable of doing, what its utility is. And that's why utilitarianism is bad. And we can intuit that, but we can't. It's hard for people to articulate why utilitarianism is bad, because what it does is it takes your morality and reduces it to things, the way we conceive and perceive of things. So people don't have a purpose. People have meaning, whereas objects have purpose. So our left brain tries to give objects purpose, and then it utilizes that rationalization and it projects it onto people and sees them as the same thing. But life is not things. We have to make that distinction, because we need to love people and not things. And that's the other important aspect of Christianity. So, right says what, but the right says what about the relationship it has to all the other things you aren't considering. So in the left hemisphere, making it simple and simplifying everything to a reductionist, utilitarian perspective, it loses its meaning and connection with everything. So in reducing something to its purpose, you lose the meaning of those individuals. You don't, it doesn't make sense who they are anymore. Like, they're a thing now instead of a being. And we need to have, if we're having a relationship, it needs to be with a being. So that's why people conceptualize God as a being, because in order to have a relationship with it, you need to conceptualize it that way. Okay, so religion is the process for establishing meaning. Science is the process for establishing purpose. I've went over that. And religion, both verbal, spiritual, in the mind, all these different ways of getting religion into your mind, a lot of it comes through the Luciferian intellect, and it will be rejected by Luciferian intellect. So when your brain is drawing these connections, you need to be careful, and it needs to happen slowly and gradually for a lot of people, because it's going to give you anxiety. If you have a lot of anxiety, it's because you're rejecting this. You're rejecting the connectedness of everything, because your Luciferian intellect is stopping your right brain from functioning. And I think that's why a lot of people have anxiety these days. I think it's the biggest reason, and that's the connection I've drawn, is because they are being reduced to a small set of what they can truly be. They can be so much more. Okay, so religion is a process for establishing meaning. Science is a process for establishing purpose. You cannot find meaning without purpose. So if you don't know something's purpose, or if there is no such thing as purpose, you can't even have meaning, because if you don't see the connection between different things, then there's no meaning. Like, if I don't know that a fire means danger, then if I don't draw the connection of what a fire's purpose is, then I don't know the meaning of it. Like, I would say the purpose is how it manifests, right? Like, so it's like, if it causes you to burn and die, that would be, or causes its purpose is to burn things. And the meaning would be, if I burn, this is what happens. So that's why you can't have one without the other. You have to understand them both, and you have to give the devil his due. And you can't find purpose without meaning. So those are two things you cannot have on their own. Engaging in play or flow is the state where you have meaning and purpose. So that's when their meaning and purpose are combining to elucidate an experience where you're literally engaged in every way. You're engaging both hemispheres in to the maximal amount. That's the idea of flow. So that was another epiphany I had. Okay, and then we can go over the synthesis of dichotomies. I've already went over this a few times, but as these things pop into my head, I keep writing them down, and I've tried to make it as ordered and structured as I can for a lot of you analytical thinkers who are going to want it that way. But I think I started from a good spot where I went from the reduction and the simple aspects of this mode of thinking all the way to this more complicated aspect. So we have the synthesis of dichotomies. So chaos and order are relatively broad terms that cover the aspects of many dichotomies. That's why it's the abstract or the connected. The connected brain draws all these connections and then it abstracts it out into its own perception of what these dichotomies are. So it's not, chaos and order doesn't exist anywhere in nature. Like, it's not a thing you can measure, but it's a concept that is connected in every way with everything. And it's the same with regression and expansion. Everything has these elements and characteristics. So you can say order is when things become more simple. They regress. And so those are almost interchangeable words. And then as something becomes more chaotic, it's more connected, it's more expansive. And that is in everything. Everything you can think of. Every single dichotomy that I've laid out has those aspects or those characteristics. And these are the more abstract characteristics, whereas before I went through the physical characteristics, like the actual measurement, like the objective measures that we can take of a dichotomy. Sorry, I'm fiddling with this. But when we take this concept down to the particular domain, it can lead to a deeper understanding if we try to either synthesize them or compromise between them. So a synthesis and a compromise are two different things. A synthesis is when you're combining two perspectives, and then a compromise is when you're giving up, each side is giving something up. And it's hard for me this is one of the hardest parts for me to articulate, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. So I need other people to help me with the understanding of what the difference between a compromise and a synthesis is, especially when it comes to dichotomies and how we utilize them to synthesize new ideas. But I think what I was saying in the last video about how when we create new products like a smartphone, we had to take different perspectives of reality and new technology that we now understand and combine it. And that's a new synthesis. Whereas a compromise is what happens over time. Like, compromise takes time while that process is happening. It's like for example, like once you reach that goal, it's like you have the phone, but you're trying to improve it. So you keep compromising on different elements of that. And that would be how you apply it to things. It's like, okay, do we need both? How do we achieve good battery life with screen size or screen resolution? It's like, well, you're trying to balance the two, right? So you have to compromise. Like, I can't have infinite battery and I can't have infinite screen size. So I have to balance the two. And in that compromise, you get the item itself on the other side. So whereas the synthesis was the original, like the bang that flashed the idea into the person's head to where they start to implement it. So the implementation of it is the synthesis, And compromise is when you're going through the process after the synthesis happens. So I think that's a good way to word it. I just figured it out. Okay, so we'll move on to forms. So I've already covered this as well because I'm connecting everything, just like the right hemisphere would do. Every time I talk about something, it's all connected. So, but I think it's in at least a structured enough way for people to grasp it. And obviously I'm going to get a lot of questions over time, but as we flesh this out for ourselves, I think it's going to be great. So we have forms. So the pure form of the left hemisphere is science. And a lot of people are going to be like, well, the right hemisphere is involved when you do science. Well, it's like, of course it is. It's going to draw the connections between things so that you can do science. But what I'm saying is, if you were to make an extreme case for your left hemisphere, what does it do in reality? And what would its pure form look like? Because in order to understand the dichotomy again, we have to understand that rationalized extreme. And that's what I'm doing. I'm rationalizing the extreme, just like that's what stereotypes are. They're a rationalization of the extreme rather than the average or the truth. Like, it doesn't cover everything. It's like, I'm not saying, like, when you talk about average IQ for male and female, it's like, yeah, men have a wider, flatter curve. That would be the more accurate thing than saying men are smarter and dumber, right? Like, well, you're not really telling me how that actually maps onto reality because it's a bell curve. Like that is even more truth. So you're adding more layers of truth when you're doing those things. So science epitomizes the left hemisphere's cognitive strengths. Yes. And everything that is characterized by apprehension, which is grasping things, analytical thinking, systematized thinking, detail-oriented, and logical reasoning, and, of course, my favorite, rationalizations. It is pure form. Science seeks to understand the external world through empirical science, which is an experience. It's not mapping true to reality. It's just a way of reducing things to measure them. So we're measuring a specific thing, and in doing so, we're ignoring everything else. So unless you're taking enough into account, you're not going to understand the whole, but that's okay, because for the sake of the purpose of what we're trying to do, the empirical evidence is going to help us attain something. So the left hemisphere focuses on precision and specificity and allows for the dissection of complex phenomenon into manageable components, leading to clear and reproducible conclusions. So again, that's what I was saying. It's like, hey, let's test this hypothesis. Let's see if we mix these two chemicals together, will we always get the same thing? Yes. Okay, it's reproducible. That means that these elements work together in this way, in a reproducible way, and now we grasp it. Now we fully understand the relationship between these things, and that is then communicated to the right hemisphere. It's like, hey, here's a new relationship you can apply to things. Like if you have sticky tape, like there was no such thing as like sticky tape 10,000, 15,000 years ago when we were like living in, there's not caveman paintings where they post a little picture on the wall with sticky tape. Like that's not a thing. So in order to understand what that is, we had to figure out the relationship between these different dichotomies and how they intersect and manifest in reality, and how to make them useful and give them purpose. But again, in doing so, we've slowly ignored our right hemisphere more and more and more because the left hemisphere has been so utilitarian and practical. It's given us those benefits. So science's practical utility lies in the ability to generate reliable knowledge and technological advancements. By emphasizing controlled experiments, control, again, every time you hear things about the left hemisphere, it's going to be about control. So just remember that. It wants to control everything and everybody. And if you see people trying to control each other, it's because they're thinking in this rationalist perspective. By emphasizing controlled experiments and objective measures, science develops theories and applications that have direct, tangible benefits. So there's a benefit to it. Give the devil his due. Again, the devil isn't an enemy. It's just something you need to keep under control. the devil that you need to harness. You need to harness it and control it. And you'll do that with your right hemisphere. And you can do that. I'm going to go over submission and how you can submit to your right hemisphere's way of thinking. And I would say submit to God, because our right hemisphere is connecting to God. How you submit to that. I'm going to do that in another video. And I thought it was beautiful when I thought of it. So, pure form, right hemisphere, religion. Religion represents the right hemisphere's strength in comprehension, holistic thinking, intuition, and contextual awareness. But remember, this is all relational. Like everything you see here, it's like, what is the relationship between things? That's holistic. You have to see the relationship between things. Comprehension, comprehending things. You have multiple things. In order to comprehend it, you have to understand multiple things. Contextual awareness. And then obviously your relationship with everything and everyone. Like that comes from the right hemisphere. The love. Like love is of the right hemisphere. Love cannot be of the left hemisphere because it's focused on specifics. It reduces things to parts rather than wholes. So it doesn't see a whole person. The left hemisphere cannot see an entire person. It's going to be fixated on specifics of that person, like their hair, their like specific characteristics they have. And in doing so, they reduce them to something that they don't care about anymore. They only care about a part rather than the whole. So they're like, I really like your hair, or I hate that person's hair. Like that is not seeing an entire being. Like you're seeing an element of them that isn't representation of what they truly are. And everyone is beautiful in their own way. And a lot of people have rejected that, but we need to remember that life is precious, and we cannot treat it as if having any issue is something that we should, discard. So when people submit to God, they're saying to submit to the right hemisphere and allow yourself to see the connection and relationship between everything. This is what I was saying, that you need to submit to your right hemisphere. And I'll go over submission again in another video. I'm about to run out of time. Okay, so meaning and purpose. Religion addresses existential questions and offers narratives that integrate individual and collective experiences into meaningful framework. This aligns with the right hemisphere's ability to perceive the broader context and interrelational relationships between the different aspects of life. Through stories, symbols, and rituals, religion offers a comprehensive system for understanding and navigating the human condition. So, this is much of what I just went over. It gives us purpose and meaning and connection with everyone. And then there's overlap and integration. Both science and religion require the integration of hemispheric functions to gain the best possible understanding of reality. Scientific inquiry often demands creative problem solving, and holistic thinking, the right hemisphere, while religious practices involve logical interpretations of text and structured rituals, left hemisphere. So there's elements of religion that have to do with both hemispheres, and I'm going to go over that again in my submission video, where you submit to your right hemisphere and to God. In doing so, you utilize things that would be of the left hemisphere. So like you grasp objects, which is why like people grasp a crucifix when they pray. You grasp it with your right hand, it goes to your left hemisphere, and you say your prayers, and you tell yourself to submit to your right hemisphere and God. And here's the thing is if I don't know if I want to keep using left and right or right submitting to right hemisphere, because in saying so, I'm creating a rationalization of what's happening, because you're drawing the connection between everything. So I'm not, and in this way you draw a Luciferian connection to your right hemisphere. Your left hemisphere is going to be like, "Ooh, I love my right hemisphere." Then I really do, and it's going to draw that connection. When in reality, it's like you're connecting everything. So that's kind of the difference in thinking that you should have. But for the sake of simplification and rationalization, I'm going to say it in that way. While religious practices involving text, spiritual, so there's physical text. Your text, again, when you read, it's of your left hemisphere. So you're going to try to rationalize things. And as you read the Bible, you're going to continue to try to rationalize it. It's just not going to make sense. But then when you look at it as a whole, then it all makes sense. This interdisciplinary nature highlights the necessity for both analytic and holistic thinking in a balanced cognitive process. Okay. I haven't fleshed out dynamic interaction yet. I'm not even sure what I'm going to say about that, but we're going to get into the corpus callosum, which is the mediator between the left and right hemisphere. It's a small module in the back of your head that connects the two brains. And we're going to go over a little bit of that. We already went over pure forms, but if you want to read a couple more notes on that, you can. We'll go over integration, implications of what I'm saying has on society, and then maybe we'll get into all the other philosophies and what they have to say about this theory. But these are much more expansive and unflushed out because there's so many connections within these. These are huge bodies of information that I would have to draw connections to, and it would take a lifetime. But what I've done is I've laid the framework for others, and I hope that you all learned something today, and I love you all. Thank you very much.